Hello and welcome back to my Sonic the Hedgehog discussion and retrospective. So last time we went through each of the main series 2D Sonic games, and this time we're taking on the very interesting 3D era as we play through one of Sonic's most infamous titles, Sonic 06. So let's start out with Sonic 3D Blast for the Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn. So the version I am familiar with is the Genesis version because that's the one Sega always puts on collections. The difference is soundtrack, some graphics are better on Saturn, special stages are different, and so on, but at its core it's the same game on both platforms. Personally, I think 3D Blast is an interesting idea, but not a very fun game. It's the one Sonic game other than Sonic 4 Episode 2 in this list that I haven't actually finished because I've never felt like going back to it. When I played the Mega Collection, I'd play a little bit, get to like the second zone, and just stop and go back to Sonic 3 or 2. So yeah, it's not horrible, but it's just not great either. It's just kind of boring, so I just never felt a desire to finish the game, to be honest. So, it's also an isometric 3D platformer, so I'm just kind of counting it as a technicality. It's sort of debatable if it's a main series game also because it's not made by Sega, it's made by Traveler's Tales, the LEGO game developers. Also the Sonic R developers. So overall, I do think Sonic 3D Blast was an interesting first attempt, but the actual next 3D Sonic game was going to be Sonic Extreme, and that got cancelled. It also looked pretty rough from early showings, so maybe it's for the best that the actual released game was Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast. So Adventure 1 and 2 I'm gonna lump together because I have very similar thoughts on both. So I grew up with both, on the GameCube through the DX and Battle, respectively, and I think I like Sonic Adventure 2 more because I grew up with that one. It's largely nostalgia. Adventure 1 was fine, but I got really frustrated as a kid because of how buggy the game was. Apparently every iteration of these games gets glitchier than the last, so apparently they were better on Dreamcast. I never played those versions, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia for Sonic Adventure and Adventure 2, and so much so that I actually end up overlooking a lot of the problems people have with both games, mainly the differing character styles. So for Sonic Adventure, I actually don't mind playing as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. I'm not really a fan of Gamma or Big. However, I actually in recent years don't mind them as much as I used to because their sections are really short. Like Gamma and Big do not have much screen time at all, so it's not super painful to go through their storylines because of how short they are, so I can kind of put up with it, and then, you know, just focus on the good parts, like the other 4 stories. Same goes for Sonic Adventure 2. A lot of people don't like the mechs or the treasure hunting. Personally, I do feel like treasure hunting is better in Sonic Adventure 1 because of the better radar, and also Sonic Adventure 2 has some really frustrating stages like Meteor Herd and Mad Space and Security Hall, which is where I got stuck on the game for years as a kid. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the treasure hunting. I actually don't mind the mech stages as much by comparison, partly because I like Tails and Eggman better as characters than Knuckles and Rouge, admittedly. But overall, I actually can overlook a lot of the flaws in both adventures to the point where I can still have a really good time, and they are still some of my favorite games, as flawed and dated as they currently are. Oddly enough, the next game is Sonic Heroes, which I actually think in some ways has aged better. I don't think I enjoy playing it as much as the Adventures, but I think as a game it holds up better. Like, it's more technically sound for starters. It's also just kind of unique because it feels more like a 2D Sonic game because of the 2-act format, special stages, and so on. So it has a unique feel to Adventure. I just don't like having to replay the same story 4 times, basically. Of the different characters, I prefer playing Team Rose, actually, because their stages are very short. Sonic and Shadow's stages are very long. Team Chaotix's stages range wildly in length and difficulty. But yeah, Team Sonic and Team Dark's stories have very long levels, and Team Rose's feel a lot more concise. So yeah, I generally prefer to stick to the Team Rose levels. Overall, though, I actually like Heroes, I think, more than most. I will admit that the control is definitely a lot worse than Adventure. It feels super floaty at times. Like, not floaty, but like loose, like slippery. Like, permanent ice physics is the best way I can describe Sonic Heroes and Shadow. And speaking of Shadow, Shadow is actually my least favorite Sonic game. No, if you count it as a Sonic game. Okay, actually, it's not my least favorite now, it used to be. For many years it was my least favorite, but has now been dethroned. Personally, Shadow is just kind of a joyless slog from beginning to end. Like, it's not the worst game in the franchise, it's just really boring and glum. For example, having to play through 10 different story paths just to unlock the true ending, which then disregards the actual other endings. The gameplay is, again, like Sonic Heroes, very loose, but with more objective-based gameplay like Team Chaotix, and some objectives are just exceedingly painful to go through, like, the one arc level where you have to destroy artificial chaos, which can take like half an hour to get through. So yeah, Shadow's just not a fun time, personally. It's like the Sonic game I'd play the least, next to one other, which I'll mention a little bit later. Again, it used to be my least favorite, now is second least favorite. Again, that's also not counting like Secret Rings, which I'm not gonna go over in this video. So after Shadow, they kind of did an anniversary title, which is the one we're playing right now, Sonic 06. It's a little glitchy. It's definitely very unpolished because they wanted it out for the launch of the PS3, and they still managed to miss the deadline. The PS3 version got delayed until January and is actually buggier. So good job with that delay, I guess. The game is notoriously bad and broken, and I actually don't mind it though. I would play it over a lot of Sonic games, because as glitchy and problematic as the gameplay is, I can still have a lot of fun with this. It's like somewhat entertaining how broken it is. Like, for me, if I like fall through the floor or something, I don't get particularly upset. I'm just like, oh wow, that just happened, and move on. Instead of games that are just like frustratingly hard. So yeah, I would actually play 06 over a lot of Sonic games. Definitely not a favorite, but I definitely think it's not... I definitely disagree a little bit about how hated this game is. Like, I won't say it's great by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a little overhated, I would say. Because at its core, it's kind of just more adventure, just with more bugs. And a worse story, I would say. But overall, I still have a good time playing through 06. Also, the load times are bad, if that hasn't been obvious enough. So after 06, they ended up rebooting Sonic because of how badly 06 did review-wise. It actually sold okay, just it got review bombed really badly from critics and fans alike. Actually, review bomb has a different connotation, but yeah, it really bombed badly in terms of scores. And again, somewhat justifiably so, even though I can still have fun with it. So yeah, Unleashed came out and also got really bad reviews at launch, but interestingly, people remember it much more fondly now than they did in 2008. So, a lot of people hated the game because it was very fast-paced at the expense of control, like, you know, a lot of cheap deaths and bottomless pits, and the werehog wasn't fun, and so on. But in hindsight, it's remembered really well because I think hindsight helped Unleashed a lot because it made the newer Sonic games are a lot easier and a lot more linear in design. I feel like made people think about Unleashed having really complicated level design and a certain level of ambition that's currently missing in Sonic. For example, the story is super well produced, exceedingly high budget cutscenes and presentation. They did like short films to promote the game, and they don't do that anymore. But yeah, the opening cutscene of Unleashed is considered one of the best things to come out of the Sonic franchise basically ever, and I would probably agree with that. At least it's the best cutscene in probably any Sonic game. So, on the whole, I actually would agree with that, because when I first played the game, I thought it was frustrating and not very fun. But playing it again last year, I came away really liking it. Again, I liked the presentation and the story. The gameplay felt a lot more accessible after playing games like Generations. And the werehog didn't even bother me because it's like it's a little incongruous with Sonic design, but it's so fun to play. Like, the werehog controls well, at least. So yeah, I actually came away really liking the game. I didn't even hate Eggman Land as much as I thought I would. So yeah, Unleashed surprised me on my second playthrough. It was actually really fun. And it's probably my second favorite Boost Sonic game after Unleashed. That's what I'm talking about, after Generations. Personally, Colors, which is the next one, next 3D Sonic game, is one that has the opposite reaction from a lot of people, where a lot of people liked it at the time, and people remember it less fondly now. And I actually still like Colors. Like, I think the writing is surprisingly solid. As lighthearted as it is, I think the writing actually does work well, like jokes land successfully, and so on. But the biggest issue I have with Colors is how short certain stages are. Like, some stages are like, you know, 5 minutes long, and others are like 30 seconds long. So it feels very uneven, like some levels just had no budget compared to the main stages. So it's a very uneven game, which I guess you can also say about, you know, Unleashed, but it's also very easy going back to it, and the few times I did die were just because the controls are a little bit off. Like, it doesn't control super well. None of the Boost games really are meant for precise platforming, though, to be honest. But Colors, I think, is more platforming focused than like reflex based, so it's more apparent how awkward platforming tends to be, especially in 2D. And Colors has a lot of 2D sections. So yeah, overall, I still like Colors. I still think it's a good time. I definitely see why people don't like it as much in hindsight, though. And next up is Generations, which is probably my favorite Boost Sonic game. It's definitely got some really great music, level design. The story is actually kind of surprisingly shallow. It's just kind of an anniversary title, and unabashedly so, which is good and bad depending on how you look at it. The over-reliance on nostalgia worked in that game better than any other Sonic game since, because it was fresh. You know, it had been a while since we've had throwback levels, so having Green Hill and Chemical Plant was actually super refreshing. So yeah, Generations is probably one of my favorite 3D Sonic games. Yeah, followed closely by like The Adventures and Unleashed. It's just a really fun game from beginning to end. Also doesn't have as much fluff or like... And also most of the really short levels, like the 30-second levels you'd see in Light Colors, are optional. And just designed as like little bonus activities. So it's a nice way to not feel like padding, but still have extra content. So it's like, Generations just does a lot really well. Even for non-fans, I'd say it's still a pretty fun time, even if you don't get every Easter egg or reference. So, next up, Sega just threw out the success of Generations and made something completely different with Lost World. They were basically trying to rip off Super Mario Galaxy with space-themed, cylindrical levels and very generic level themes like desert and grass and sky, and I don't like Lost World. When I said there's one game that dethroned Shadow from my least favorite Sonic game, I was talking about Lost World. So from a pure gameplay standpoint, it's mediocre. Like, it's not bad. It's frustrating in like a cheap way. And that I don't like about it, but you know, from a basic gameplay standpoint, it's just exceedingly mediocre, but not like the worst game ever. What makes it my least favorite Sonic game is the character interactions. They're all terrible. Sonic and Tails just kind of are at each other's throats for most of the game. They're just kind of arguing, and it's not like funny. Deadly Six are horribly characterized, where you don't really feel anything for them because they're just generic villains of the game without any other depth or motive. So when you take a mediocre game and give it a really bad story, it becomes way worse for me. So that's why Lost World has become my least favorite, because it's like, it's at its core it's not outstanding, but then you throw in the story and character interactions, and then it becomes terrible. So yeah, there's Lost World. And then there's, after that, they took a break and came back with Sonic Mania, made by the mobile Sonic port team, and that was really great. But unfortunately, then they thought it would be a great idea to tie it into Sonic Forces, which I think doesn't work. You know, the whole classic Sonic coming back is cool for Generations. It feels so pointless in Forces though. So classic Sonic is one of my biggest gripes, because one, he's useless in the story, and two, he plays worse than like Sonic 4. Then there's the whole issue of the avatar system, which I think is fine on paper, but the fact that they don't talk or have a name is kind of lame. And then there's the fact that the story and writing is terrible, with huge plot holes and gaps. So yeah, Sonic Forces is like my third least favorite mainline Sonic game, only beaten out by Shadow and Sonic Lost World, because the writing is mildly better compared to Lost World, but still not great. So again, it's like Lost World, where it's like, it's a mediocre game that's made even worse by having an exceedingly terrible story. But he was hoping that whatever they come up with next is much better. Apparently there's a Sonic game in the works, and I hope that's good. In any case, this video has probably gone on long enough, so thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my quick Sonic thoughts.